Thank you for taking the time to watch the video. Like and subscribe. It helps me a lot. And if you want a specific recap, just comment down below. Now let's get into it. The story in the novel begins like this. One day, the world faced a calamity. Towers and dungeons appeared out of nowhere, spawning monsters. These monsters attacked humans, plunging the world into chaos. The Korean peninsula, in particular, became infamous as a region where dungeons and towers appeared non-stop, and the monster attacks were fiercer than in any other country. It was nothing short of the underworld. But within the darkness, the brightest lights were born. In the novel, these lights were called heroes. Through the power of these heroes, Korea battled monsters and gradually brought the towers and dungeons under control. Using an industry built around the calamity as its driving force, the nation recovered from the crisis. Over time, Korea rose to become a leading global power, rivaling America. It became a nation in the spotlight, where heroes from around the world gathered. As a countermeasure against the increasing number of monsters and dungeons, Korea founded a hero institution using state-of-the-art magic and magical engineering. This academy, known as the Cube, became the place where hero cadets from across the globe, those who had overcome unimaginable acceptance odds, came together. It was also where the hero destined to save the world and his rival existed. That was the story's setting. The creator of this world wasn't God, it was the author. But now, there was a problem. In a roaring coliseum surrounded by confetti, an announcer declared, "First among the first-year cadets, Kim Soo-ho." The world the author had written was unfolding right in front of him. The Cube cadets, Kim Soo-ho. This was exactly like the world he created. What was going on here? Suddenly, he began hearing the thoughts of all the spectators as though he could read their minds. Their voices rang loud and clear. From the VIP box seats, someone remarked, "The students this year are incredible, but among them, Kim Soo-ho is unbelievable for a 17-year-old. Kim Soo-ho. He was this world's main character, the one destined to lead a chaotic world dominated by heroes and monsters. With the traits of an upright hero who upheld justice, he also harbored a secret that no one else knew. And then there was his rival, Shin Jung-hak, second place among the cadets. A fourth-generation heir to the powerful Jinsung Corporation, Shin Jung-hak possessed potential to rival even Soo-ho. However, he was a future villain, a staunch believer in elitism, and plagued by an inferiority complex towards Soo-ho. Later in the story, these two would clash as light and darkness. To see the central characters standing so close to each other confirmed the author's suspicion. He was inside the world of his own novel. But then a question arose. Who was he? If he had created this world, he should at least recognize his character. A tap on his shoulder pulled him from his thoughts. "Why are you spacing out, Chungdong? Did you stay up late again?" someone asked. He turned, confused, and asked, "Are you talking to me?" "Of course I'm talking to you. I don't see any other Kim Chungdong around here," the boy replied. Kim Chungdong? The name was unfamiliar. Was there a character with that name in his story? He couldn't recall writing one. Maybe he would recognize him if he saw his face. On the Jumbotron, his reflection appeared, but there was a question mark over his face. That was when he realized he had become a character he never wrote. His name was old-fashioned. He had no appearance settings, and his presence was barely noticeable. No one even cared that he didn't have a face. He was ordinary, except for the fact that he was a Cube cadet, a character with no meaningful connection to the main plot or its characters. This guy, he's basically just an audience filler. That was the truth. He had become an extra in his own novel. No, he had become a speck of dust within it. One day, an email arrived. The author stared at the subject line and muttered, "What is this?" The email contained a proposal to remake a story he had written. The web novel, The Returning Hero, had stopped serialization over a year ago because he had fallen into a slump. They want to remake something that's been abandoned? He thought, shaking his head. There really are all sorts of unusual people in the world. The proposal stirred a pang of guilt in him for leaving the story incomplete. Believing it was simply a request from a dedicated fan, he sent a reply. He had no way of knowing that this single email would become the catalyst for everything that followed. It had been 2 weeks since the author first woke up in this strange new reality. Washing his face, he gazed at his reflection, or what should have been his reflection. Instead, an unknown face with a question mark stared back at him. By now, he had grown used to it. This isn't a dream, he thought, resigned. This was the world of his novel. The body he inhabited belonged to Kim Chung-dong, a nameless extra from the story. Over the past 2 weeks, he had tried countless methods to figure out how he was transported to this world, who had brought him here, and why. None of his efforts yielded answers. The possibility that he might have to stay in this world for a long time, perhaps even permanently, began to sink in. If the timeline continued beyond where his novel had ended, it would span about 10 more years. The thought of being trapped here for a decade weighed heavily on him. 10 years, he muttered bitterly. Stuck in a novel I didn't even finish, laughing with kids still in their teens. He had a life back in the real world. He didn't want to waste it here, barely surviving. But for now, he had no other choice. To escape, he would need to catch up with the main storyline. If he could reach the midpoint of the plot, the last part he had written, he might be able to figure out what lay beyond. With no better plan, he resolved to live in this world for the time being. And to do that, he needed to go to school, the Cube. The Cube was an artificial island located in the Eastern Sea, home to approximately 50,000 people, including preliminary hero cadets. It was a city built by the combined talents of magic users and engineers from around the world. The existence of the Cube was one of the reasons Korea was considered a global powerhouse. At the heart of the Cube was its hero training school, the main stage of the novel's events. Even among hero candidates with extraordinary abilities and talents, only a select few elites were admitted. Kim Chung-dong, the body's original owner, was one of those cadets. Though the author didn't know what abilities Chung-dong possessed, he hoped they would be enough to survive this perilous environment. Classes at the Cube were the story's focal point. It was here that antagonists, villains, sidekicks, and rivals emerged. And it was also where the protagonist resided. Soon, cliques would form, leading to countless complications. The author sighed, thinking about spending 10 years with these characters, especially with no face of his own. He had no idea what to do. Back at the dormitory, he trudged upstairs, exhausted. How did I ever manage to study all day back in high school, he wondered. As he reached his room, he noticed a box labeled Cube Deliveries. He picked it up, carried it inside, and dropped it on his desk. "What's this parcel all of a sudden?" he grumbled. Opening the box, he was stunned to see his computer inside. His eyes widened in disbelief. "Why is this here?" He booted it up. As the machine hummed to life, a message appeared, synchronization beginning. Suddenly, the computer emitted a bright light, engulfing him. The screen displayed text. Kim Chung-dong possesses 54 SP. Synchronization with Kim Ha-jin is starting. The computer began processing information. Settings are being downloaded. Variables, invariables, talent, mastery, and the chronological order of settings acknowledged. The author stared in shock. This was his setup, the exact details from the settings book he had created for the novel. Who sent me this? He wondered, panic rising as the synchronization reached 99%. The computer shut off. A final message appeared. Unique authority. Setting intervention acquired. At that moment, the author's form began to crack and shatter. A new face emerged. The screen declared, Kim Chung-dong has been turned into Kim Ha-jin. All stats have been reset due to synchronization. The author, now Kim Ha-jin, stared at the reflection in disbelief. Synchronization complete. When Kim Ha-jin looked into the computer screen, he realized the face staring back was his real face. Surrounding the screen were blue status windows, leaving him confused. Recognizing what was happening, he identified it as an enlightenment, a phenomenon in this world that occurs when one surpasses their limits. Enlightenment allows individuals to see their talent, skills, abilities, and values, enabling them to grow stronger through far more efficient methods. In simple terms, it unlocked his status window. As Kim began to examine his talents and stats one by one, two entries caught his attention: synchronization and initialization. He didn't know what they meant, but he suspected they were why he no longer had a question mark for a face. However, he also noticed his stats had drastically decreased compared to before. In exchange, he had been granted points to distribute. Next, he turned his focus to setting intervention, a unique authority granted to him. This wasn't something he had written into the original novel. According to his description, it allowed him to gain more story points based on Kim Ha-jin's importance in the world. He began to suspect the main reason he had received this laptop and strange ability was to interfere with the world story. While pondering this, a glowing status window appeared, revealing that locked information would only be unlocked once the main story ended. Frustrated, Kim realized that if he wanted a hint about returning to his original world, he would have to comply and interfere with the narrative. Sitting at the computer, Kim reasoned that there was no guarantee he would be sent back even if he did nothing, and waited for the story to progress to the part where he had stopped publishing. Even if the unlocked information wasn't the answer he sought, getting involved with the main characters might still reveal a clue. To do so, however, he would need to become strong enough to withstand the challenges of the main story. In Kim's novel, there was no concept of leveling up in the traditional sense. Stats couldn't be increased freely, making points an extremely valuable resource. To make the most of them, Kim decided to invest in luck, a stat that influenced every aspect of life, from finding hidden rewards in dungeons to forging relationships and gaining unexpected bonuses. It was in essence a cheat stat. Although luck was an invariable stat and couldn't normally be raised with points, Kim discovered it was possible to convert his regular points into story points and use those to boost his luck. He decided to give it a try, converting 10 points into 10,000 story points and investing 9,000 into luck. During this process, a mysterious bonus effect activated, increasing his luck to 9.1. Satisfied, Kim noted that the protagonist of the novel, Kim Suho, had a magic power stat of 9.0, meaning his luck was now truly remarkable. With the remaining story points, he invested in perseverance, a stat crucial for enduring the cube's harsh training. Again, his mysterious luck took effect, boosting his perseverance from 6.6 to 7.2. At that moment, the system glitched, displaying a warning. An error that can greatly influence the plot has been discovered. From now on, invariable stats cannot be modified with story points. Kim sighed in frustration, thinking the restriction was unfair. Still, he managed to salvage both his luck and perseverance stats before the system imposed its limits. He remembered he had another 10,000 story points from novice consideration, but decided to hold off on using them for now. The next day at Cube, training class began under the supervision of their instructor, Kim Soo-hyuk. He was a mid-ranking hero with a ranking point of 3,850 and a worldwide rank of 9,737. According to the Hero Association's classification, he was a high intermediate rank, level 5. Standing before the cadets, Soo-hyuk wasted no time. Cube isn't the enjoyable place you might have imagined. You'll be evaluated solely based on grades. Underperform, and you'll be held back. Statistically, less than half of you will graduate without repeating a year. This is a facility for nurturing heroes, and you will be judged by exacting standards. Without further delay, he instructed the cadets to follow him to the weapon armory. With a handprint, he unlocked the massive doors, revealing an array of gleaming weapons, swords, axes, spears, and more. The students stared in awe, but Soo-hyuk barked, "Don't just stand there. Pick your weapon. Once chosen, you won't be able to exchange it for 6 months, so think carefully." The main characters selected their weapons with little trouble. Kim Soo-ho, the protagonist, chose a sword. A green-eyed girl with long hair picked a bow, while a blonde girl with yellow eyes opted for a rapier. Other students selected whips and gauntlets. When it was Kim Ha-jin's turn, he hesitated. He knew his stats were too low to handle the standard weapons. Even if he worked to raise his stats, the results would never justify the effort required. He needed a weapon he had experience with from his original world, one that required minimal adaptation. Finally, he made his choice. The other cadets stared in confusion, and even Soo-hyuk was taken aback. "Are you sure about this?" the professor asked, raising an eyebrow. Kim Ha-jin held up his selection with confidence, a gun. The entire class was stunned by Kim Ha-jin's choice of weapon. Professor Kim Soo-hyuk raised an eyebrow and remarked, "Didn't you use a sword back at the military academy?" Kim Ha-jin responded calmly, "I decided to make a change after coming to Cube." The professor narrowed his eyes at him, his tone sharp but controlled. "Every decision you make here is your own. Whether it's right or wrong, you'll bear the full responsibility. Don't ever forget that." Kim Ha-jin remained unfazed by the warning. Around him, he could hear the murmurs and thoughts of his classmates. Their words were full of disbelief and condescension. What's he thinking? Why would anyone choose a gun here? Kim Ha-jin scratched his head, confused by their reactions. To him, the gun was still a perfectly valid weapon in this world. For ordinary civilians unable to handle magic power, guns were commonly used. The most frequently used ammunition type, magic bullets, imbued with mana, offered far greater destructive power than standard metal bullets. However, the gun was shunned in Cube for 2 clear reasons. First, no matter how strong its wielder was, the weapon's destructiveness had an upper limit. Second, the gun's history was too short. In a world where myths and legends came to life, weapons tied to ancient stories and artifacts held immense power. The deeper the history and grandeur associated with a weapon, the higher its rank. Cadets at Cube overwhelmingly preferred traditional weapons, trusting their skills and the latent power of legendary armaments. Even when they hit their limits, the weapons themselves could help them surpass those boundaries. But Kim Ha-jin dismissed these concerns. "That's not my problem." He wasn't the protagonist of this story. He'd never even held a blade before, so there was no point in trying to compete with the other cadets in their specialties. For him, the gun was the most practical choice, something he could wield immediately. Additionally, its uniqueness would help him stand out, earning valuable story points. With his weapon selected, it was time to gain his talent. In this world, a talent was a person's specialty, an innate ability that defined their potential. Most people received only one talent, but rare exceptions existed, like the protagonist Kim Soo-ho, who possessed both an active and an inactive talent. One of these was the legendary sword Sane ability. Elsewhere, in the training room, Kim Soo-ho greeted Chai Na-yin. "Are you training here too?" "Why else would I be here?" she retorted, her tone curt. Kim Soo-ho smiled. "There weren't many people after class, so I figured I'd stop by. By the way, our class has another sharpshooter now." "Oh, you mean that nobody?" Chai Na-yun's face twisted into a disgruntled frown. "Why are you so bothered by him?" Kim Suho asked. She scoffed. You can't even call him a sharpshooter with a range of less than a kilometer. He's probably already given up on becoming a hero. He's just biding his time, hoping to avoid a dropout on his record. Kim Suho frowned. That's a harsh assumption. You shouldn't say things like that so lightly. Her expression faltered for a moment before she snapped back. Don't tell me what to do. If you're not training, then get out of here. Meanwhile, Kim Ha-jin, completely unaware of their conversation, scratched his ear as if sensing someone was talking about him. His thoughts returned to his talent. Since he wasn't the protagonist, he knew how crucial talents were for survival. With 10,000 story points available, he couldn't waste this opportunity. He decided on something simple yet effective: Master Sharpshooter. This talent specialized in long-range weaponry and was applicable to various tools, not just guns but also bows and other ranged weapons. Using 10,000 story points to write the talent, it automatically adjusted to an intermediate rank ability with a spirit attribute. Although modest at the start, the talent was evolving, meaning it could grow stronger over time. Satisfied with his choice, Kim Ha-jin felt a little more prepared. With a weapon and a talent in hand, he was confident he could survive until the end of the main story. The following day, during a lecture on dungeon theories in the Cube Auditorium, Kim Ha-jin thought about how the world had expanded beyond the sparse descriptions he had written. What had once been a few vague lines was now a fully realized textbook. If the characters knew about this, they'd probably cry from envy. Thanks to his talents, observation, and browsing, Kim Ha-jin had no trouble with the class. Observation allowed him to gather detailed information on anyone in his field of vision, including their smartwatch data. Browsing let him access the timeline settings directly from his Retina's notebook-like interface. Meanwhile, Chai Na-eun, clearly uninterested in the lecture, suddenly burst out. Why do we have to learn this? Isn't practical training enough? Before anyone could respond, the door swung open, and a cadet rushed in, shouting, "Class Veritas, head to the square in 20 minutes for practical training." The announcement brightened Chai Na-eun's mood. "Finally!" she exclaimed, her earlier boredom replaced by excitement. Most of the other cadets shared her enthusiasm, but Kim Ha-jin silently dreaded what was to come. In the square, Professor Kim Soo-hyuk addressed the class. "Today we'll form teams. Each team will consist of 4 members, 2 warriors, 1 sharpshooter, and 1 support. These teams will remain the same until the midterm exam. The distribution is balanced, pairing high and low-ranking cadets together. Now, check the board for your assignments." Kim Ha-jin's eyes widened as he scanned the list. To his dismay, he was placed on the same team as that guy. The author grew uneasy upon realizing that he had been placed on the same team as Yuyona. In the world of this novel, key characters close to the protagonist either supported or opposed him, driving the story forward. Among these characters, Yuyona stood out as particularly special. As the main inheritor of Korea's top guild, Essence of the Strait, and the successor of a prestigious household, Yuyona wielded immense influence. At the beginning of the novel, she opposed Kim Suho, the protagonist, but gradually became one of his most reliable allies. The author understood her significance. Establishing a connection with Yuyona was crucial, not only because of her narrative importance, but also because deeper involvement in the story would earn him more story points. Determined, the author resolved to use the day's training to find a way to attract Yuyona's attention. 2 of their team members introduced themselves to Yuyona, momentarily catching her off guard. Maintaining her composed demeanor, she introduced herself with a bright and polite tone. As she looked around for their last team member, the author stepped forward boldly, declaring that he was the one they were waiting for. Yuyona eyed him with visible uncertainty. The author reminded himself not to falter, Yona despised people who lack confidence. Just then, the axe-wielding teammate interjected, pointing out that the author was the one who had chosen the gun during weapon selection. The professor loomed over the team at that moment, silencing their chatter with a menacing glare. "Do you have time to talk?" he barked at the author, startling the entire group. Without further delay, the professor announced that the monster locations had been sent to their smartwatches and ordered them to head out immediately. The author's team made their way to a vast wheat plain bordering the ocean. The trek was arduous, and Yona informed the team they would arrive soon, urging them to prepare. While she explained the game plan, the author lagged behind the rest of the group, struggling to keep pace. "I'm dying," he thought, his breath labored. Though his vitality stat was well above that of an average person, it barely allowed him to keep up with the others. He began to wonder if this was the norm for Cube cadets. The team finally arrived at their destination, training area number 8, the beach. Waiting for them was their opponent, the Black Hump Octopus, a lower middle-class monster. As the team observed the octopus gliding through the water, they began planning their strategy. The Black Hump Octopus itself wasn't particularly powerful, but the hump on its head posed a serious threat. When the creature sensed danger, it released baby octopi from the hump to swarm and attack enemies. These blood-sucking creatures could reduce even the strongest opponents to mummified husks in seconds. The team agreed that dealing with the baby octopi first would be their priority. One of the teammates suggested that the gunner, referring to the author, handle the dozens of creatures quickly. However, Yona immediately interjected. "I'll take care of the baby octopi," she announced, her tone firm. The warriors should conserve their magic power for later. She added that the Black Hump Octopus had an exceptionally strong recovery rate, meaning they would need to sever the hump in a single, decisive attack. The author's expression darkened as he realized Yona was trying to exclude him from the fight. When she shot him a cold glare and said, "Let's start the mission," he returned her glare with annoyance. The battle began as the Black Hump Octopus effortlessly tore apart a nearby boat. One of the warriors swung his axe against a rock, creating a loud clang to lure the creature toward him. The octopus responded instantly, surging toward the shoreline at an incredible speed. As it reached the beach, it reared its grotesque head, aiming to attack the axe-wielding teammate. The team quickly moved into position, each member preparing for the fight. Tension filled the air as the real battle commenced. The hump on the back of the octopus began to rumble ominously until it suddenly burst, sending a swarm of baby octopi flying toward the beach. Team 5 stood frozen in shock as the creatures launched through the air, heading directly for their axe-wielding teammate. Unprepared and mid-sprint, the axeman panicked. Just as the baby octopi closed in on him, a black whip snapped out of nowhere, striking down the incoming swarm. Yona stood tall, her weapon in hand, effortlessly eliminating dozens of the baby octopi in an instant. One of her teammates gawked at the display, marveling at her raw power. "So this is why she's ranked 7th among the new cadets at Cube," he thought, hurriedly thanking her before continuing his escape. Yona remained locked in combat with the main octopus, trading calculated blows. But amidst the chaos, one of the baby octopi managed to sneak behind her. Spotting the danger, the frontline teammate shouted a warning. "Behind you!" Yona spun around, only to find herself face to face with the lunging creature. In that instant, a single gunshot rang out, and the baby octopus exploded midair. Yona blinked in surprise, her eyes darting to the source of the shot, the author. The rest of the team stared in disbelief, stunned by his unexpected accuracy. Yona herself, momentarily caught off guard, quickly snapped back to her usual demeanor. "Stay out of this," she snapped, her voice cold. Before the author could respond, the octopus's hump began trembling again, signaling another eruption. Dozens more baby octopi spilled out, surging toward the team. Yona faltered briefly, but the author remained unfazed. This is what he thought. The enemy's only strength is their numbers. But even that's no real threat. Their movements are simple, and their trajectories are obvious. Seizing the opportunity, he activated his ability, Bullet Time. For 3 seconds, the flow of time slowed dramatically in his perception. Every movement became clear, each trajectory easy to follow. In that brief window, the author moved decisively. He raised his gun and began firing, each bullet finding its mark with unparalleled precision. One by one, the baby octopi fell, obliterated in less than 3 seconds. When the dust settled, Yona's expression betrayed a flicker of astonishment before she quickly masked it. The main octopus, now desperate, prepared to unleash another wave of baby octopi. Its hump trembled violently, but before it could erupt, Yona's whip lashed out and coiled tightly around the hump, holding it in place. "Now," she commanded. The two frontline teammates surged forward, their weapons glowing with magic power. In a synchronized attack, they slashed through the octopus, slicing it cleanly in half. The battle was over. The author, completely out of breath, stared at the remains of the octopus. "Did we clear the task?" he muttered to himself. A loud beep rang through the beach, signaling the end of the mission. A system announcement followed. Team 5 results. Time, 58 minutes, 58 seconds. Current ranking, 16th place. Monster cleared. Yona glanced at the author with a thoughtful, almost insightful look before turning and walking away without a word. Yona was livid when she saw her team's ranking, 16th place. The instructor informed them that their battle footage, recorded through drones, would be sent to their smartwatches for review. Yona trembled with frustration. Although the assessment was based on individual performance, the team ranking still stung, especially since Chai Nayan's Team 2 had placed 4th. Chai Nayan's success was like salt in the wound. Yona vowed to create a clear gap between herself and Nayan. Her irritation deepened as she observed a boy from their class admiring Nayan instead of her. Fueled by jealousy, she slapped the table and stormed over to Nayan, her aura menacing. Yet when she approached, she masked her feelings behind a bright, cheerful demeanor. "How did your team do in the practical?" Yona asked sweetly. "We came in 4th. Nayan replied nonchalantly, "But it's a shame. I really wanted to beat Rachel and Jonghak." Yona feigned composure, even as she seethed inside. "Oh, we ranked 16th, she said, her tone light, though the reality gnawed at her. "That's amazing, considering you had a gunman on your team," Nayan said with a smirk. "It would have been so much better if he wasn't holding you back." Yona hesitated. Despite the 50-minute delay caused by that man on a 10-minute route, he had contributed significantly during the monster battle. His bullets had eradicated dozens of baby octopi before they even touched the ground. She wondered if such precision and speed were even possible without magic bullets. Something about him was unusual. Meanwhile, at the training area, the author sat drained from the day's exertions. He checked his stats, noting their growth. Accuracy enhanced significantly when targeting low-rank monsters, thanks to his luck. Talent proficiency increased by 20%. Perception rose by 0.03. Story points gained 27. He grinned, satisfied that his interference with Yona had paid off. His stat boosts were bolstered by his high luck, and he decided to call it a day, confident he had progressed enough. Later that night, back at the Cube dorms, Yona reviewed the footage from the practical exercise. She froze the video, replaying the scene where the author shot down the baby octopi. In 2.78 seconds, he fired 60 shots, she muttered, astonished. Is it even possible to pull a trigger 20 times in 1 second? Or does his gun have an automatic fire mode? She recognized his extraordinary agility, but noted his volatility was lacking compared to other cadets. The sudden switch from a sword to a gun only added to her suspicions. She wondered why she didn't remember seeing him at the Military Agent Academy. Her thoughts were interrupted by a message from Jong-hak. "Jong-hak, what are you doing?" Her expression brightened. She replied, analyzing my footage. "Jong-hak, always doing boring stuff. Why not relax for once?" "Yona, I'm inheriting the guild. I need to scout talent early." "Jong-hak, your team doesn't have talent. They're all trash." "Yona, what about the gunman?" She chuckled at his response, finding his curiosity cute. "Jong-hak, maybe he just got lucky." Yona couldn't shake the thought. Was the author truly lucky, or was there more to him? At the Creator's Sacred Grace Guild headquarters, Deputy Guild Master Yun Sung-ah reviewed footage of the Cube cadets. "Kim Suho," she remarked, watching him defeat his opponent with elegant movements. "His swordsmanship is like flowing water, as though he's dancing with his blade. It's no wonder the top guilds are targeting him." Next, she analyzed the author. His use of a gun caught her attention. The assistant explained he's been a topic of discussion in the guild community. Many noticed his performance because he was on Yona's team. Without an automatic rifle, he shot 60 bullets in 3 seconds, hitting 59 of his targets. "It's almost heretical." Sung-ah frowned. Switching from a sword to a gun is typical after enlightenment, but at 17? That's unusually fast. Enlightenment is rare and often limits talents to a specific weapon. If his is limited to guns, it's not very appealing. The assistant informed her that all scouters were fully booked with this year's extraordinary batch of cadets. Sung-ah sighed. "Leave him be for now. If he's truly a diamond in the rough, he'll shine on his own. Whether heretic is a fitting title or not will reveal itself in time." The following Wednesday, Kim Suho and another cadet were sparring intensely. It was the day for anti-personnel training, which paired cadets in groups of 2. The training used specialized weapons that minimized pain and made judging easier. However, the author wasn't granted the luxury of sparring with a fellow cadet. "Get up immediately," the instructor barked at him. Groaning in pain, the author lamented his predicament. Why was he the only one forced to fight an instructor? "It's because Cube hasn't finished developing your training firearm," the instructor explained. "Using real weapons during anti-personnel training is dangerous. That's why you're sparring with me." Unable to muster any more energy, the author raised his hands. "I surrender. I can't fight anymore." "There's no such thing as surrendering in real life," the instructor bellowed, charging at him with a haymaker. "Raise your guard." As her fist hurtled toward him, the author activated his advanced vision ability, dodging at the last possible second. His unexpected reaction startled the instructor. The author continued to evade her relentless attacks, narrowly dodging each strike. The instructor observed his movements, thinking his posture is garbage, but somehow he's keeping up with me. He's following my attacks with his eyes. This was thanks to the author's 1,000-mile eyes, a skill that allowed him not only to see distant objects, but also to vaguely predict his opponent's movements. However, seeing an attack coming was only half the battle. Dodging it was up to him. The other cadets watching from the sidelines snickered at his awkward, jumpy movements. "He looks ridiculous," one of them jeered. Despite the humiliation, the author earned 40 story points from the interaction. After training, the author grabbed a soda from the vending machine. Exhausted, he noticed Yona walking past with a duffel bag slung over her shoulder. Their gazes met briefly, tension crackling between them. She's exactly how I wrote her, the author thought, a grin tugging at his lips. Perfect opportunity to test something out. You, Yona, he called out, tossing her a soda. She caught it with ease but frowned. Are you trying to start a fight? Confused, he scratched his head. No, I just wanted to thank you for carrying the team last time. Thought we could get along. This was a calculated test. If being indulgent to background characters earned him 40 story points, what could he gain from engaging with a main character? Yona's expression hardened. Drink it yourself. And don't talk to me so casually. I never gave you permission to do so. Consider this your first warning. She turned and walked away, but something fell off. Pausing, she checked her bag. Her eyes narrowed when she spotted the soda can nestled inside. That idiot, she muttered, tempted to toss the can into the trash. But after a moment of hesitation, she sighed. The soda didn't do anything wrong. From a distance, the author smirked. He knew her character's setting better than anyone. Yona secretly loved junk food, cola, ramen, hamburgers, but her image-conscious nature prevented her from buying such things openly. Even small pokes at her character's setting won't yield many story points, he mused. I need to squeeze myself into the main story. The author's thoughts shifted to the upcoming Jin attack on the National Weapon Museum. Jins, individuals who had traded their souls to devils in exchange for power, were spread across the world, enacting the devil's will. This incident would be an assassination attempt on a prominent figure at the museum. However, the plan would fail thanks to the main cast, who coincidentally happened to be there viewing the exhibits. This event would highlight Kim Suho's abilities and draw the interest of other main characters. The author saw an opportunity. Early in the story, Jins weren't especially dangerous, making this a perfect chance to integrate himself into the narrative. But how do I get into the museum? He wondered, lost in thought. His musings were interrupted by an instructor's shout. Lessons are over. Return to the dorms. Packing his laptop, the author prepared to leave. Suddenly, the screen flickered and glitched. Amid the distortion, a message appeared addressed to him. At Cube, clubs are considered scholastic activities, essentially small organizations run by cadets. They span various interests, including academics, martial arts, hands-on experiences, and numerous hobbies. With over 100 clubs, there's something for everyone. Beyond personal growth, clubs serve as social platforms for cadets to build connections. This particular day, the author was participating in one of these clubs. At the Cube Gate, a cadet named Oh Han Hyun was introducing new participants to the Healing Rain Travel Club, a group he presided over. Han Hyun surveyed the fresh faces before him, recognizing the exceptional talent among the new members. The thought of managing such capable underclassmen made his stomach churn. Han Hyun explained once again the club's purpose. Our primary objective is rest, he said. Using portals, we travel outside Cube once or twice a month. Today, we're heading to Seoul for group socialization. The author listened, recalling how this trip to Seoul played out in his novel. It was designed as a free-form activity where participants could pair off and explore as they pleased. For him, though, the real goal was the National Weapon Museum, where the first major storyline would unfold. His plan was to accompany the main characters heading there and seamlessly integrate himself into the narrative. When it came time to draw lots to determine partners, the author was indifferent until Yona pulled his name from the box. Both looked equally shocked and disinterested at the pairing. Once at the museum, Yona turned to the author with a condescending glare. "Let's go our separate ways," she said curtly. "Agreed," he replied cheerfully. Before walking off, she paused and added, "And don't speak to me informally again. This is your second warning. There won't be a third." "Yes, ma'am," the author said, suppressing a smirk. The author entered the National Weapon Museum, which housed Korea's largest weapon replica exhibit. As he wandered the halls, he noticed Nayeon admiring a bow in one of the glass cases. Not far away, he spotted Kim Soo-ho, the protagonist of his novel, studying a different display. The author approached Soo-ho. "Are you looking at the seven-branch sword?" he asked casually. Soo-ho blinked, momentarily forgetting the author's name. "All right, you're the guy who chose the gun. Didn't expect you to join the travel club, too." The author silently noted Soo-ho's striking appearance and charisma, thinking back to the readers who had criticized him for making the protagonist too unrelatable. "You're strong and handsome," he mused inwardly. Soo-ho offered to check out the gun exhibit together, but the author declined, knowing there wouldn't be enough time. At that moment, a loud crash echoed through the museum as the ceiling began to crumble. Pedestrians froze in shock, staring upward. The intercom blared. "Warning! Warning! Monsters have appeared outside the museum." The announcement repeated, but the voice turned panicked, ending in a horrified scream. Chaos erupted as visitors pushed and shoved, desperate to escape. Even children were caught up in the frantic crowd. Seizing the moment, Nayeon smashed the glass case, holding the bow she had been admiring, and armed herself. Spectators and Soo-ho stared at her in disbelief. "Calm down," she shouted. "The hero assigned here will arrive soon. If you go outside, you'll just become monster feed." Breaking the case triggered the museum's theft alarm, activating blockades that sealed off exits. Nayeon turned to Soo-ho. "Grab a weapon. We'll hold out until help arrives." As tension mounted, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed. A man dressed in all black with a menacing aura emerged from the crowd. "There's already one inside," he said with a smirk. The author recognized the figure as Lucius's dog, a Jin villain he had written to serve as growth fodder for Soo-ho. The Jin charged, black mist swirling around his claw, and lunged at Nayeon. Glass shattered, and in an instant, Soo-ho flash-stepped behind the Jin, ready to finish him with a single strike. It's just like the novel, the author thought, watching intently. But the Jin swatted Soo-ho aside effortlessly, slamming him into a pillar and leaving a crater. The author's eyes widened in shock as he watched Soo-ho's body slump to the ground. "What's going on?" he thought, unable to comprehend the unexpected turn of events. The author stared at Soo-ho's crumpled body on the ground, a sense of unease washing over him. Something was wrong. This wasn't how the story was supposed to unfold. In the novel he had written, the heroes would struggle briefly at the start, but ultimately gain the upper hand when Soo-ho revealed his strength and overwhelmed the enemies. "Nayeon!" Soo-ho coughed, blood spilling from his lips as he tried to rise. Nayeon screamed his name in panic, rushing to his side. The author, observing from a distance, asked if Soo-ho was all right, though he could clearly see the protagonist was in poor condition and needed time to recover. The Jin, undeterred, advanced toward Nayeon and Soo-ho with predatory intent. Nayeon quickly drew 2 arrows and launched them to intercept the attack. The arrows struck the Jin, but he merely absorbed the hits, smiling in amusement. Confused but determined, Nayeon fired another volley, only for the Jin to brush them off with ease. Gripping her bow tighter in frustration, Nayeon realized the Jin wasn't using any special ability to nullify the arrows. He was simply enduring them with sheer grit. The Jin laughed mockingly, and the author's heart sank. He could see what was coming. "Get away from him!" the author yelled at Nayeon, panic rising in his voice. The Jin lunged, aiming a strike directly at her face. At the last moment, Soo-ho sprang to his feet, landing a flying kick to the Jin's face and forcing him back. "You alright?" Soo-ho asked Nayeon, his breathing ragged. "Shouldn't I be asking you that?" Nayeon shot back. Before they could exchange more words, the Jinn growled and lunged again, forcing Suho to block with his blade. The black mist surrounding the Jinn coalesced into the form of a snarling dog, its fangs snapping menacingly at Suho's neck. Suho grimaced, thinking to himself that his body wasn't used to this new strength. The Jinn's relentless assault continued. A powerful punch sent Suho crashing into the ground, barely holding off the dog's fangs. Seeing Suho in peril, Nayan fired 3 arrows into the Jinn's back, momentarily throwing him off balance. The Jinn turned toward Nayan, his eyes gleaming with predatory hunger. The mist shifted and surged toward her, forming fangs that grabbed her face and slammed her into the wall, pinning her there. The author watched in horror, realizing that someone would die if this continued. He shouted at the panicked pedestrians to flee. As he surveyed the chaotic scene, doubt gnawed at him. This was supposed to be the world of his novel. So, why were the events unfolding differently? He forced himself to calm down. Pulling out his laptop, he accessed the system that allowed him to alter the novel settings. His hands trembled as he unloaded his pistol, the belt clattering to the floor. These bullets are useless, he thought, recognizing their low destructive power. Even if he increased their potency, they wouldn't be enough to deliver fatal damage. But if the foundational rules of the world he wrote remained intact, he had another option. Using the laptop, the author altered the attributes of the mana bullets, increasing their destructive power and changing their element to light. The modification cost him 104 story points, but he made the change anyway. After saving the settings, he loaded his pistol, determination hardening his resolve. He thought about the reason this world required so many heroes. The diversity of attributes and synergies allowed individuals to overcome even vast differences in power. Taking aim at the Jinn locked in combat with Suho, the author steadied his hand. Darkness. Light is the answer, he thought. Suho, get out of the way, he shouted. Suho reacted instantly, dodging to the side. The author fired a single shot, a bullet of radiant white light streaking toward the Jinn. It hit its mark, exploding on impact and bathing the room in blinding light. In that moment, the bullet blasted off the Jinn's arm, causing him to scream in pain. The severed limb fell to the ground, and with it, Nayan, who had been pinned against the wall, dropped to the floor. This gave Suho the opportunity he needed to charge up his blade. The author thought to himself that the broken gun at his feet had bought more than enough time. Weary and exhausted, he glanced at Suho, waiting for confirmation. Suho cloaked himself in a greenish-blue aura, preparing his blade. He locked eyes with the Jinn, who was momentarily caught off guard. The Sword Saint's magic, a power that could cut through anything, surged within Suho. In an instant, he slashed through the Jinn like a hot knife through butter. The Jinn cried out in agony, defeated by Suho's overwhelming strength. Both Suho and Nayan were on their last legs after the battle. Suho approached Nayan to comfort her, but she slapped his hand away. The author, watching, remarked that she would be fine and that her older brother would likely come to console her soon. He knew this, of course, because he wrote the novel. It hadn't happened yet, but he was sure it would. But in that moment, both Suho and Nayan shot him a chilling glare. Nayan trembled as she asked what he had just said. Before the author could answer, she vomited, and Suho, despite the grim situation, tried to comfort her again. Outside, chaos unfolded as flaming-mouthed lizards ran amok, but they were easily defeated by someone who sent golden charges to pierce them to the ground. The Vice Guild Master observed the aftermath, noting that the situation had nearly come to an end. An ambulance arrived to report that the emergency outside the museum had been handled. The Vice Guild Master, relieved, wondered what was happening inside. The paramedics explained that a Jinn had been taken care of, and there were 3 cube cadets inside. The Vice Guild Master immediately inquired about who the cadets were. The paramedics mentioned Naeun and Suho, but before they could finish, the Vice Guild Master's eyes widened, and she rushed toward the scene. She thought to herself how lucky she was to have a chance to meet Suho in a place like this. She considered what she should say when she saw the author exiting the building. This was perfect timing. The author, looking up in shock, was greeted by the Vice Guild Master, who inquired about Suho's location. Before she could finish her question, the author cut her off, telling her that Suho was inside. The Vice Guild Master thanked him and proceeded to leave, but then stopped, suddenly wondering how he knew she was looking for Kim Suho. Sitting on a nearby bench, the author looked pale, his heart pounding. Talking to the Vice Guild Master had rattled him. He wondered if this situation was somehow tied to the changes in the main story. He opened his laptop to make sense of things. A foreign character, Ken Hagen, had entered the story, but the author dismissed him as insignificant. Everything had been progressing without issue, so he assumed it wouldn't matter. But then it hit him. This world wasn't just based on his original novel, it was a remake. The events were shaped not only by his writing, but also by another person's input. If that was the case, it made sense why things weren't unfolding as he had predicted. With a shiver, the author realized that the predictions he had made about this world might now be useless. Suddenly, a new message appeared on his screen. There is one flaw. The protagonist and the characters around him never encounter real danger. If this continues, readers will tire of such predictable, boring repetition. As a result, a stopgap measure has been implemented. For now, enemy levels will be increased, even if it leads to chaos. The instructor called over Kim Suho and Ha-jin, having heard the gist of what had happened. He told them he would ask for specifics later, and for now, they should return. Suho asked about Naeun's condition. The instructor informed him that she was taking sick leave to be with her family, and then told the two of them to head back to the cube as well. As the instructor walked off, Suho and Ha-jin stood in silence. Suho asked Ha-jin about earlier, specifically why he had said something like that to Naeun. The author was confused by the question, but Suho clarified, asking about the comment regarding Naeun's older brother. As the author tried to explain why the comment was made, another message appeared. A point of criticism. The author didn't know anything about her older brother. Suho asked if the author was pretending not to know, to which the author confirmed he really had no idea. Just then, Suho suddenly winced from a sharp pain. He dismissed the discomfort, saying they could talk about it later. The author, reading through his settings, learned that Naeun had ranked 4th overall at the Military Agent Academy and was currently enrolled in the Hero Realization Facility at the Cube. Her family included her father, Shin-hyuk, and her brother, Jin-yoon. As the author reviewed his settings, he was confused. Everything seemed to align with his previous writings, so he couldn't understand the reaction from Suho and Naeun. That is, until he saw a headline that shocked him. It was about something called Operation Fire Spark. He quickly read the details. Fire Spark had been a Jin suppression operation, marking the first time that Jin-yoon, the main character's assistant, had earned his laurels. Naeun, only 13 at the time, had been extremely proud of her older brother, who had become a hero, or at least, that was how the author had originally set it up. Then, another message appeared. In the original work, Jin-yoon was Naeun's reliable older brother and Suho's assistant. However, it was deemed that the main character had too many assistants. The setting has been changed as follows. For years ago, Jin-yoon, after being appointed as a hero, was involved in an accident on his first deployment. He received a demon's brand and has since become a demon seed. The author was disturbed by this change. He read a news report which described how, around 1 p.m. that day, a horde of monsters had appeared at the center of Seoul. The monsters had injured about 50 civilians and killed 7. Among the chaos was Yun Sung-ah, vice leader of the guild Essence of the Strait, and others. In that moment, Na-Yun, sitting in a hospital room, turned off the radio, her mind reeling as she wallowed in her thoughts. She curled into a fetal position until her father entered, shouting her name. Surprised to see him, she asked about his work, but he reassured her that work wasn't important right now. Her health and well-being were far more crucial. He continued to ask if she needed anything, and she told him she was fine, questioning why he had come all the way there. He took her hand and said that he was deeply worried about her. Na-Yun asked if she could go visit her older brother before being discharged, to which her father agreed. The author noted that demons, powerful beings from another realm, could brand humans and turn them into demon seeds. These seeds would undergo an incubation period, eventually blossoming into strong demons. In the author's original setting, this incubation period lasted 5 to 6 years, meaning half the time had already passed. Realizing the urgency, the author concluded that there was only one solution. He needed to kill Jin-yoon before the demon inside him awoke. But then he wondered who could carry out such a task. He understood the challenge. No mercenary would accept a request to kill the 4th son of a powerful family, and with no visible signs of the seed budding, no one would take action against it. The author knew that it would be impossible for Suho to defeat a fully blossomed demon. Even if all the active heroes were mobilized, some would undoubtedly be sacrificed. That's why it couldn't happen, not like this. These heroes needed to grow stronger for the later parts of the story. The author trembled as he came to his grim conclusion. He would have to be the one to kill Jin-yoon. Meanwhile, Na-Yun, speaking to her unconscious brother, reflected on her first encounter with a djinn, realizing how close she had come to death. She questioned how a normal cadet was supposed to injure such a powerful creature. Her thoughts turned to the author's comment, and she stopped herself, anger bubbling up at the memory of his horrendous words. A hospital attendant notified her that visiting hours were over. She said goodbye to her brother, leaving the building sulking. As she walked away, she couldn't shake the anger over the comment the author had made. She bit her lip, vowing to get back at him. Thanks for tuning in to No Limit Recaps. If you enjoyed today's recap, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to avoid missing any of our future videos. If you want this manhwa's next part, drop it in the comments. Got a favorite manhwa or a series you want me to cover next? Drop it in the comments below. Your suggestions keep this channel growing. You can also join our Discord for more updates, sneak peeks, and manhwa discussions. Until next time, stay limitless.